soir c'est noir, il n'y a plus d'espoir.
Hello, this is Michelino, blogging from the dark. Please, dear readers, do not panic. If you can't see any picture, it's supposed to be that way. Because I would like to share with you a wonderful experience I had with a couple of bloggers from Paris last Saturday. Let me tell you what happened. My friend Rhino and I got together on Saturday night and met with a group of disgustingly handsome bloggers. Matou, Icare, Thanos, Norman from Widow Creek, and Lord Fiddle Bubble. We headed for a restaurant called Dans le Noir in the heart of the Marais, where waiters are blind and where you get an unusual experience, the experience of sitting in the dark, in total darkness. And it's in that perfect darkness that you're going to enjoy a surprise meal. You don't know what it consists of, you just have to guess. And remember, you can't see anything. You have to pour wine, you have to find your fork and knife, you have to find the water, and you have to make sure that you actually pour the wine into your glass and not on your plate, or that you actually then drink the wine out of your mouth and not out of your cleavage. But since I know for sure that you all wanted to be there with us, I've decided to share a little bit of that experience with you to show you how actually difficult it is to suddenly do everything in the dark. Now, for example, I have here, in total darkness again, a bottle of wine. I just opened it because I had to turn on the light to open it because I couldn't do it in the dark. And I'm going to pour this wine into my glass. So let me find the glass first. Okay, here it is. I'm touching things now, and I have to find the bottle. Here it is. Alright. I'm going to put away the camera a little bit because I'm afraid I'm going to pour wine on that camera. Okay, shall we start? Have to touch the glass again to make sure that I know where the top of the bottle is. Let's see. Okay. Now, the thing is that you don't really know how high you should go into the glass, since you may be pouring all over yourself, but I think this went well since I'm not wet yet. No, I'm fine. Alright. Okay, that was the first experiment. Isn't that wonderful? Number 2. What I'm going to do now is to try to walk through my dark apartment, since it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I turned off all the lights, and it's dark outside, of course, and it's my own apartment, so I know where things are, and I'm near the main door, and I'm going to walk through the apartment now and try to see what it feels like to walk in perfect darkness. Oh putain de merde. And it doesn't start very well. I know there's a cord somewhere from my computer, and I am going to try to avoid it. And fuck, that was a chair. And now, yes, the thing is that I've already reached the end of my apartment because it's not very big. So that experiment didn't go very well. So let's move over to experiment number 3. Now, the next challenge we had during our meal at that dark restaurant was to actually know who is talking to whom and who is listening and who isn't. So let's imagine you're talking to me now, and you have to try to figure out if I'm listening or not. Number 1, let's say you're saying to me, so I went to the party and I had a good time. And you expect, of course, someone to answer by going, oh, really? Who did you meet there? Or how was it? But as you know, people don't always answer. They just nod or they just show with their eyes that they're listening. Now, I'm going to try to show you that I'm actually listening to you. Let's start. You see, so that's how most of our conversations ended. Or, well, they had to end because we were never really sure who was listening or not. So it was okay to talk to the person right across from you, but almost impossible to talk above the person sitting next to you to another person. So we started a lot of conversations, but didn't end many. Now, a real advantage of sitting in the dark with good-looking people is that a lot of things can happen in the darkness. No, I'm not talking about touching each other or playing footsie, because we're decent boys and this didn't happen. However, you can look absolutely horrible. You can pick your nose, you can use toothpicks, you can really look ugly, you can take a little nap while people are talking to you. You can do all sorts of things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were in the light. And this I liked. I'm sure you're wondering why I'm talking like that, as if I were working on CNN or something like that. But this had nothing to do with this video. This was just a little side note. Because I'm wondering myself, alright. Finally, you can never expect how people are going to react when they're sitting in the dark. When you do your regular daily activities in the light, everything is fine and dandy. You don't even think about the movements you're making. But ending up in this dark environment and continuing on doing things that you do every day, such as eating, for example, is quite scary. For instance, when we got in there, I got a bit claustrophobic, not knowing if the space was small or if it was huge or if there was a wall here or if there were stairs there. But still, I think all our table reacted in a very civilized fashion compared to the table who was sitting next to ours. The people who were sitting there were pretty aggressive throughout the night. I don't know if it was due to the fact that they were complaining about food that was not suitable, or whether they were complaining because they were actually scared of sitting in the dark. But it didn't end well for that table. Let me tell you what happened. One of the girls sitting around that table suddenly complained that she received some water on her. And a little bit later, a whole glass was obviously thrown at her and broke on the floor. But since you're sitting in the dark and you're not allowed to turn on the lights, there are infrared cameras everywhere in case there's an emergency. But apart from that, you're not allowed to bring in your mobile phone, you're not allowed to bring matches or lighters or anything that can produce light is forbidden in the restaurant. So when you get something thrown at you, of course people tend to react in a very stressed out manner, which is what happened. And that whole table started yelling and screaming and yelling at that poor blind waiter who had to ask them to exit the place gradually. But as one of the men who was sitting around that table felt really stressed out by this whole situation, he used his mobile phone, turned it on, and suddenly we could see what was happening in the dark. That's when I realized that I was sitting across from a wall, which I thought was Rhino the whole time, but Rhino was not at all sitting across from me, or my chair was oriented in a manner that was not actually facing Rhino. So I had spent my whole evening speaking to a wall, the one that was next to Rhino. Sitting in the dark, as I told you, can indeed be a real advantage. So I told you that you could pick your nose, you could pick your teeth, you could make faces when somebody said silly things. But for example, you have no idea what I'm doing right now. You think that I'm sitting here, facing you, looking all gracious as I usually do. But actually no. What you don't know is that since I'm in the dark, I'm actually sitting on the toilet. Isn't it wonderful? So what can I tell you about this experience? Well, I do recommend it, but I do not recommend it if you go there with people you've never met before. Because for a person like me, you have to have really highly developed verbal skills in order to make sure that you're going to give the right impression of your personality. So I couldn't count on my regular, really flirty, pouting movements and eyebrow movements and sensual eyes. It didn't work there. They didn't care. They just evaluated my personality according to the few verbal skills that I have. And I can tell you, that was a real challenge. But thankfully, something happened later that made sure that I would show what I'm capable of in a more light environment. But in the end, guess what? I had a wonderful time, and I got to meet absolutely wonderful people with whom I think I'm going to keep in touch. It is not fun to be blind. The perfect place for a blind date.
Noir c'est noir.